The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good morning, and happy Monday. Welcome to our Housing Inventory Count Survey webinar training for our Supportive Services for Veteran Families program and our Rapid Rehousing programs. My name is Elizabeth Perez, and I am joined by my colleague Christophe Valcourt, and we are both here from All Chicago. Okay, so having some difficulties moving to the next slide, so if you could just bear with me for a moment. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. So before we begin, let's review a few housekeeping rules. All lines have been muted to minimize the background noises. If you have a question at any point during the PowerPoint presentation, please be sure to submit them in the chat box. If time allows, we will answer a few questions that we have seen throughout the presentation, and we will also have an opportunity to open up the lines for questions. When opening up the lines, make sure that you do raise your hand and that your mic is working if you are utilizing your computer. If you are unable to use your mic, you can always feel free to use the phone-in option and ask your question that way. So for today's webinar, we would like for you to learn two main objectives. One is understanding what the housing inventory count is and the purpose, the rationale why we do it, and also being able to walk away with knowledge on how to complete your housing inventory count for each applicable rapid rehousing and SSVF project at your agency. On your screen, you'll see today's agenda. So we will cover a few common acronyms that we see and that we utilize throughout the housing inventory count. We'll also review the history and purpose of the HIC along with the process. And then we will quickly dive into the sections of the HIC and show a few common mistakes that we saw in 2017 in hopes that those errors are not seen again in 2018. We'll cover the due date as well as some helpful tips for you and resources. So a few common terms and acronyms that we'll be utilizing. The first one is the housing inventory count, which we also refer to as a HIC. And in a moment, we'll get into what the HIC means in the event that you do not know. The point in time count is also referred to as the PIT. The PIT is the number of individuals in your project on the night of January 25th for this year. The U.S. Department of Housing Urban Development is the largest funder for our homeless sector here in Chicago, so we often refer to this department as HUD. The Homeless Data Exchange System is shortened to HDX. This is HUD's online software in which we submit our final HIC and PIT submission. The Chicago Program Models Chart is often referred to as PMC. Our community has developed this Program Models Chart to define core values that are integral to the homeless services programming. It outlines program descriptions as well as expected outcomes and the system outcomes. And finally, the Continuum of Care is shortened to COC. It is a member-shaped organization composed of organizations and individuals who work to prevent and end homelessness. So now we're going to dive into what is the housing inventory count. It is an annual count of all the beds and units available in the Chicago COC dedicated to those experiencing homelessness. HUD requires us to conduct this count on an annual basis in conjunction with a PIT. Both the HIC and PIT occur within the last 10 days in January and on the same night. Besides it being a HUD requirement, the HIC also incorporates into other reports. One report is the Annual Homeless Assessment Report. This is a HUD report given to Congress which provides nationwide estimates of homelessness, including information about demographics, characteristics of homeless persons, service use patterns, and the capacity to house homeless persons. Locally, we have also rolled out the coordinated entry system. For those of you who have seen the Chicago Dashboard to End Homelessness, you may have also seen the number of openings for our community. The bed and unit inventory reported in the HIC is utilized to inform this this dashboard. For those of you that receive HUD COC funding, you are familiar with the COC application and the NOFA. Each year, HUD releases a Notice of Funding Availability, which we shorten to NOFA, competition. This establishes the funding criteria for all our COC programs. Each COC nationwide is required to complete the COC application that speaks toward how our local COC is progressing to end homelessness. And finally, the data reported in the HIC is also used to inform funding decisions. So you may see sometimes the Department of Family and Support Services releases an RFP for an emergency shelter or transitional housing or rapid rehousing. And that is because they view our HIC information to view what is our gap and how we can fill that gap here. So now that you know what the housing inventory count, you'll see that we only see one major change from 2017 to 2018. And this is only applicable for those that receive VA funding. The Veteran Affairs has designated components within its GPD programs, and that's the grants per diem programs. If you are receiving VA funding and have one of those components seen in the screen, please take note of the corresponding HUD project type designation that has been assigned to your project. This is the only change that we've seen. So if you completed the housing inventory count last year, everything should look similar for your program. So for our 2018 process, it's divided into 4 steps. One is the first step, which a lot of you have probably already attended if you attended the in-person HIC and PIT trainings or last week's regular HIC training. So we have been conducting trainings here at All Chicago and also at DFSS. Following that, we will receive everyone's HIC submissions. They're all due on January 29th. And then between the last week in January to February, we are conducting follow-ups. So we will reach out to those agencies that we are either missing a housing inventory count survey, or if there are some discrepancies in the numbers, we will be calling those individual projects up to make sure that we have the accurate information. Then finally, around March or April, HUD releases to each COC the notification of when HDF has opened up and will allow us to submit our final submission to HUD. So for the purpose of this webinar, we'll only be reviewing those how to complete it if you are a rapid rehousing or an SSVF provider. So we'll talk a little bit about what it means to be a rapid rehousing bed and unit. That means that the project must provide short-term or medium-term assistance, and that can be up to 24 months. The lease for the units must be between the landlord and the program participant. The program participant must be able to select the unit they lease, and the provider cannot impose a restriction on how long the person may lease the unit, although the provider can impose a maximum length of time that the grant funds will be used to assist the program participant in the unit. All the rapid rehousing projects that have beds and units dedicated to serving homeless persons and or their families must complete the HIC. However, on any given night, a rapid rehousing project will have clients who are still experiencing homelessness. For example, they may still be staying in an emergency shelter and are currently in the process of seeking permanent housing, and clients who have located and or reside in a permanent housing. So for the purpose of the HIC, you must only count those rapid rehousing beds and units based on the number of the current clients who are actively enrolled on the night of the count. So that's for January 25th, and that are only receiving, you may include people who are only receiving supportive services in the project, and that are no longer homeless. So that means that they are in a permanent housing. They can be in their own unit on the night of the count. So for those programs that receive the VA Support Services for Veteran Families, SSVF program, they must also complete the HIC. As an SSVF program, you may offer both homelessness prevention and rapid rehousing assistance, and may intermingle clients in the same project, Although effective October 1st, 2014, SSVF projects should be recording homelessness prevention and rapid rehousing participants in separate projects in HMIS. For the purpose of the HIC, please do not include those clients that are receiving SSVF homelessness prevention services on the night of the count. You must only be entering those clients that are actively enrolled in your program and that are in permanent housing on the night of the count. So let's talk about how many HIC surveys are needed and by when. So as I mentioned, each HIC survey must be submitted no later than 5 p.m. on Monday, January 29th. We will be sending out a link survey regarding the HIC survey on January 25th. So please be sure that we do have your email address. If you enrolled into this webinar, we do have your contact information, so you will be receiving a follow-up email after today's presentation. Because the HIC contains information related to the night of the count of January 25th, we do not release the link survey until the night of the count. And that is to maximize the number of agencies to complete the HIC survey and not enter information from another night. As I mentioned, a HIC survey is needed for all programs that have beds and units that are dedicated to serving individuals experiencing homelessness. So if you have an emergency shelter, an interim housing, transitional housing, safe haven, and other program models, you must also be completing a HIC survey for that. Please be sure to complete a HIC survey and do not combine all your programs into one HIC survey. Please submit a separate HIC for each applicable program. On your screen, you'll see that this year's HIC survey contains 10 sections. Although that may seem like a lot of sections, each section is relatively short. And many of the sections do contain pre-populated information based on the responses that were submitted in 2017. If the information is accurate and the same information still applies from 2017 to 2018, you may just make sure to select yes, the information is accurate, and it'll take you to the next section. So the first section is about your project information. So you'll be asked about your primary contact, your secondary contact, some site address information, and funding sources. I will make a note about the primary contact. So each HIC survey submission will receive an email confirmation with a copy of the HIC survey in a PDF format. That email confirmation will be sent to the primary contact listed in section 1. We have seen that sometimes the survey taker does not list themselves as the primary contact, and maybe their ED or director is listed. So please be sure to check in with them before reaching out to us. Just that way we can ensure that that email was sent out. Because the email confirmation will come from Survey Gizmo, sometimes some inboxes register this as junk mail. So please make sure to review your junk folder or your clutter folder to make sure that that email did not bounce into there. So the majority of our rapid rehousing and SSVF projects may be selecting tenant-based scattered site or and will be asked about your address. For the purpose of the HIC, we do wish to capture a complete address, and that means entering an address where the majority of beds and units are located. We do understand that some projects do not have just one main address where the majority of beds and units are located, and if that applies to your project, please be sure to enter your agency administrative office. For other projects, we do see that there are some site-based single project address and site-based multiple site address, and those are projects that maybe have 2 to 3 units where they house all their individuals. So please make sure to select the appropriate site address that corresponds with this project. If this is a domestic violence project, you will not be asked for an address. As I mentioned earlier, you will be asked about your funding source. In our community, we have seen that rapid rehousing and SSVF projects are funded primarily through 3 funding sources. Projects that are operating as a rapid rehousing may be receiving funding through ESG or COC. For our SSVF projects, their primary source of funding is the VA. So please make sure to select the appropriate funding source. If you are unsure, please check in with your fiscal department just to ensure that you are selecting the correct funding sources for your program. As I mentioned earlier, the HIC survey will show information pre-populated from 2017. On the screen, you'll see that the question as it is shown in Survey Gizmo. So you will be taken to a login kind of option, and you'll be prompted to enter your username and password ID. In order to move forward, you do have to utilize the project name as it was reported in the 2017 HIC and the HMIS ID number that is associated with the project. If you are unsure of the exact name or the HMIS ID number, you may always click on those blue hyperlinks that are shown in your screen, and those take you to an online 2017 HIC submission chart that shows all the responses that we had in 2017. On your screen, you'll see a sample of what it looks like, and you'll also see the hyperlink that we have in the event that you wish to look at it as of now. For those projects, as I mentioned, we do have a set name for every project that we have submitted. So please make sure that that username matches the project name as it is listed in my HIC chart in order to advance. The HMIS ID password is listed in orange, so please make sure to enter that HMIS ID number as well. The 2017 HIC submission chart is listed in alphabetical order based on your agency name, so you can feel free to scroll until you reach your agency. I will make a note that the login section is very case sensitive, and as you can see, some projects have a hyphen in there, like a little bit of heaven, ESRN overnight program. So as a handy trick, I copy the name from the project name in the 2017 HIC submission chart and just paste that into the username box section of the Survey Gizmo. And then I just type in the HMIS ID number. This helps to move along individuals, so feel free to use that handy trick. In the event that your project was not reported in 2017, you may enter the project's information as a new project. You will be selecting the type of project. So for the purpose of today's webinar, we are only reviewing rapid rehousing. For our SSVF programs, you may note that in our program models chart, we don't have a program model named SSVF. So for the purpose of the HIC, you will also select your new program as a new rapid rehousing program. You'll see that it contains a dummy password, so just make sure that you utilize that dummy password in conjunction with the rapid rehousing program. So if this is a new program, you would enter your username as a new RRH program, and that password would be 2004. You will be prompted to update your information so that way we can make sure that we know what the actual name is of your program and an HMIS ID number in the event that you are already utilizing HMIS. So section 2 will contain pre-populated information from 2017. So you'll see your Chicago program model type, your HUD type, and your bed type. I will make a note about bed type. That is only for emergency shelters. So for all my rapid rehousing and SSVF programs, you will only see NA for that type. You will then be asked if all that information is correct. If some of that information is outdated, you will select no, and additional questions will pop up that will allow you to update the information for your project. In the event that you are unfamiliar with the program expectations and or core values of the homeless service continuums, we do recommend that you review the program models chart. On your screen, you'll see a screenshot of what that looks like. You will be able to see information regarding the rapid rehousing program model as we define it here in Chicago. One thing to note that it was also recently updated in February 2017, so we do encourage individuals to take a look just to make sure that any of the revisions that you are making sure that you follow up with those. Section 3 is regarding the target population. A few notes about the target population. Please keep in mind that a target population is not mandatory, so you may always feel free to select NA. In addition, a target population is one where a project is intended to serve that population and at least 3/4 of the clients served by the project fit the target group description. So, for example, a youth project will select the abbreviation YMF, which stands for youth males and females under the age of 25, and not the SMF, which is single males and females over the age of 18. So in today's webinar, we have also included a PDF copy of the entire 2018 HIC survey. And this will show you all the possible questions that may come up in the HIC survey. But as you can see, not all those questions may show in the event that you do not have any updates. So you can always feel free to review the PDF just to see what are some of those target populations to see if your program may be serving that target population. At the top, you will see that information, as it was reported in 2017, will be listed, and you'll be asked whether that information is accurate. If not, you will be prompted for additional questions, so that way you can make sure to update our records. Section 4 is regarding your HIC total occupied beds. Now, for my rapid rehousing and SSVF programs, this is the only change that you do that is not what everyone else does. So for your HIC total beds, you will only be indicating the clients placed in permanent housing at the time of the HIC. Please make sure that you are not counting those that are awaiting placement, such as, they're currently looking for an apartment and you're working with that individual. Please do not count them because they may be counted in another program if they're staying at an emergency shelter or transitional housing. You will be listed that none of your beds are vacant, so we just want to make sure that you are capturing the total number of beds in your program. Your bed and unit and overflow beds, those questions are only applicable for our emergency shelter program, so those will pop up as NA. Because in 2017 you only listed your HIC occupied beds, that number may look different from last year. So make sure that if last year at the time of the HIC, you were only having 10 clients that were in permanent housing, that meant that they were in their own unit on the night of the count, but by this time, by Thursday, you had 20. Make sure that you say no and that you update that number to include those additional 10. So on your screen, you'll see what that information looks like. Again, just make sure that you are completing your total number of beds. And when we talk about your total number, that means your total number of occupied beds this year. On your screen, you'll also see how all of this information is shown in Survey Gizmo. One thing to note about that section is that we have included this for your reference only. So please make sure that you do not include your updates in this section and just let us know that yes, everything is fine because you updated that information here. That is not how we are able to capture our information. So if this information shows incorrect information, please select the following question as no, so that way we can capture your updates. For all my rapid rehousing and SSVF projects, you will not be indicating that you have any new or under development beds to report. So just make sure that you indicate no for this section to move along to the next one. Section 6 is regarding your bed occupancy. So as I mentioned, you will be listing only the number of occupied beds as your total number. So you'll be looking at that total number and dividing that amongst the different households that you are serving. So our households without children means our singles. Our households with at least one adult and one child means usually our families. And our households with only children are unaccompanied children under the age of 18. So in the event that you do have a couple, sometimes we consider couples as families, please make sure that you indicate that couples under households without children. We only want to make sure that we are capturing those households with at least one adult and one child. And when we're talking about a child, we are talking about someone under the age of 18. So for my rapid rehousing and SSVF projects, it's a little bit easier for you because you do not have to worry about your vacant or unoccupied beds because you are only indicating that total number of individuals that are in your program in a unit on the night of the count. So you'll be separating that number out amongst the households, and the other sections you will leave blank. So for the purpose of the HIC, we will be capturing your information as if you were at full capacity. So just make sure that you select at full capacity, and that'll allow you to move on to the next section. For section 7, we will be asking about your HMIS participation. So you'll be asked whether all these beds are participating in the HMIS. If some are, you will see the number that is associated with how many are participating in HMIS. If you're a DV project, you must not be participating in HMIS, so there is a specific option for them. And some of our programs do not participate in HMIS because they are not mandated by their funders, and that's okay. Just make sure that you are selecting that option. If all that information is correct this year, make sure that you say yes, and that'll move you on to the next section. If for some reason between 2017 and 2018 you increased and now all of your beds are participating in HMIS while last year some of them were, make sure that you update that so that way we have the accurate information in our files. Section 8 is regarding our specialized beds. We also refer to them as our dedicated beds. Only 3 dedicated types of beds are captured for the purpose of the HIC, and they are our chronic homeless beds, which are only reported by our permanent supportive housing programs, our veteran beds, and our youth beds. Please note that the total number of dedicated beds cannot exceed the total number of beds reported in the previous section. So if in the previous section you indicated that there were 10 beds, but in this section you indicated you had 20 dedicated beds for veterans, that'll prompt us for a follow-up for you. So just make sure that you are entering that information accurately. Section 8, as you'll see, that's how it's listed in Survey Gizmo. So you'll be asked to separate it based on households. Again, households with no children, households with at least one adult and one child, and unaccompanied children under the age of 18. Section 9 is regarding your units, so just make sure that you are updating this information, and this is based on the number of units in which those clients have been placed into on the night of the count. If all that information is the same, you'll be moved on to the next section, and if not, please make sure that you update. So again, you will only be completing this section based on the number of occupied units, so you should not list any unoccupied units. So just make sure that you are separating those numbers based on the household types. Again, similar to the bed capacity, make sure that you are entering that you were at full capacity on the night of the count. So I think everyone's very familiar with what we mean for a bed, and for a unit, we are talking about for anything that is seen as a separate living quarters. So the nice thing about our rapid rehousing and SSVF projects, that many of your clients are, when we're talking about permanent housing, they're already located in a unit, which can mean an apartment. So just make sure that you are accounting for that. And when we're talking about beds, just make sure that every individual for, if you're working with families, that you're putting everyone in a bed. So that means if you have a family of 5 in one unit, that means that you have 5 beds. And that's your HIC survey. So you'll receive a confirmation page. And again, the PDF of the HIC submission will be sent to that primary contact. We also have the option to save and continue later for the HIC. So you will see a gray bar at the top of each page that will allow you to click on that, and this pop-up window will show up. Please supply any email address that you wish for that link to be sent to. One note about that is that if you enter an incorrect email address, we cannot resend that link, so you will have to start over. So what I like to do, I like to keep that survey open until I receive the link. That way I can make sure that I can close it out and I am able to pick up just where I left off. So a few common mistakes that we saw in 2017. So we had a rapid rehousing provider indicate that they had 50 beds, but only of those 20 beds were occupied. So as I mentioned, that equals your occupied beds must equal your total beds. So just make sure that you're not counting your unoccupied beds for the purpose of the HIC. So again, we have our total units, 33, and they indicated 20 were occupied and 2 were unoccupied. So again, that equals 22, and you also have some blanks there. Make sure that you do indicate 0, because if you do not, that will register as an error and you will not be able to move forward. And again, you should not be entering any information about your unoccupied units. We just want to capture those in a unit on the night of the count. So for some of we have here a project that indicated they received SSVF funding, but when we got to the dedicated portion of the survey, they indicated that they do not serve any veterans. So as everyone can see, please make sure that you indicate those dedicated beds to match your funding. And when we're looking for veterans, we know our SSVF program targets those veteran families. So make sure that you are counting all those beds into your veteran beds. I know that not everyone in a family is considered a veteran, but just make sure that for the purpose of the HIC that we're capturing all those beds and you're not just counting the head of household. Okay. Next, we have a program that indicated that they were a rapid rehousing program. And there's some questions that ask if you had some children doubled up to a bed. So as you can see, this program indicated that there were 2 small children doubled up to 1 bed. So for my rapid rehousing and SSVF projects, please indicate that all children are in 1 bed and not doubled up. We utilize this information for emergency shelters that do place small children doubled up to a bed, just to make sure that they have enough capacity to serve all of the family. Sometimes what you'll see is you'll have this pop-up window show up on the top of your page, and because it looks pretty much, I think this size on your screen looks a little bit bigger than what it actually looks like in real life, it can be easily overlooked. And that just means that you accidentally skipped a question, and this will not allow you to move forward. So if you're trying to click next and you're not able to proceed to the next page, it's because you missed a question. So just make sure that you're looking for this kind of small red bar on the side, and it'll highlight what question you accidentally skipped. So again, a separate HIC survey must be submitted for each applicable project within your agency. We do have to have all the surveys submitted in Survey Gizmo. We will not be accepting any PDFs at this moment. If your agency is experiencing some technical difficulties with online access, please feel free to contact us so we can talk about this a little bit further offline. We will be sending the link survey on January 25th. To everyone that we have. So in the event that you have not seen email from myself or from Christoph, you can always feel free to email us. However, if you are attending this webinar, we do have your contact information, so we'll have your email listed. Again, all those questions related to the HIC are regarding the night of the count, which is January 25th. So For my rapid rehousing and SSVF providers, make sure that you're indicating that number as it matches to that night of the count. I know sometimes if you do have maybe one of your participants is going to be enrolled into a unit, they're moving in maybe on Friday, on January 26th, please do not count them in into my HIC. We only need that information for January 25th. Again, each HIC survey must be submitted no later than 5 p.m. on Monday, January 29th. A few helpful tips. So, as I mentioned earlier, we did include a PDF of the entire housing inventory count survey. So make sure that you take a minute to review so you can see all the possible questions. I like to encourage individuals to have all the information readily available before entering it into Survey Gizmo. This will allow the opportunity if you have to check in with a colleague or something, maybe with your housing locator, just to make sure that a family is place in their unit for the night of the count, that you are able to, that information already. Again, we do have the opportunity to save and return. So let's say if you want to check in with your fiscal department about the funding source for your program, you do have the opportunity to save and return at a later time. And as always, you may always feel free to reach out to our team if you have any questions about the HIC and how you should be entering your information. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our website. Along on there, we do have our HIC webinar training, which is for all our other program models, and that's already available on our website for viewing. So if you have a colleague that maybe missed last week's HIC webinar and has no idea how to complete the HIC, please refer them to our website. They can go to allchicago.org, and you'll see at the top a blue bar. If you hover over the COC, drop-down menu will appear, and you should be selecting the COC program competition. All our HIC and PIT related informations are located at the top of the page, so it should be easily accessible for everyone. Okay, and now we have some time for any questions. So if you had any questions, you probably went ahead and submitted them in the chat box. So let me check with Christoph to see if there's any questions. All right, so it looks like we don't have any questions. If you do, we can take some time now to open up the lines if anyone has any questions. So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand and Christoph will unmute you so that way you can ask your question. All right, so it looks like we don't have any questions. Again, that doesn't mean that you're not able to do so at a later point. So we'll just go on to the next one. So if you do have any questions, let's say you got back to your desk and you're completing your HIC, you can always feel free to email Christoph or myself. Christoph's email address is listed on your screen, or you can always feel free to give him a call. He is at extension 40. As you may see, Christoph and I are both in this training, so we don't have access to our phone at the moment. But just make sure you can always feel free to email us. Email does work quickest for us, so feel free to use that option. If you have a question related to your HMIS usage, for those of you that are participating in the point-in-time sheltered count and have some questions about service points and so forth, please make sure to send all those questions to the HMIS help desk so they may assist you with that. So again, just as a reminder, please complete the HIC in relation to the night of the count, which is January 25th this year. For those of you that have SSVF and rapid rehousing, please complete it based on your occupancy only. So that means that those clients that are in permanent housing on the night of the count. Each HIC survey must be submitted no later than 5 p.m. on Monday, January 29th. So just make sure that you do have a chance to submit that online. Okay, so we don't have any questions, so that concludes today's webinar. Thank you all for attending, and I look forward to speaking to you. Thank you.